Have you ever changed your name? Think about it. Maybe recently, or maybe years ago. Your first name, or maybe your last, like maybe when you got married, or maybe again when you were no longer married. I ask because I wanted to use this Harvard Community Conference event as an excuse to explore the connection between identity and destiny. Specifically, can we change our destinies by changing our names? My name is Dee Dee. For a long while, Dee Dee was my name pretty much universally, save for my birth certificate, the Social Security Administration, credit cards, legal stuff. And that's pretty much the way nicknames work, isn't it? This is the name on my birth certificate, Ahmad Mulyadi Chadran. Now, even as they registered this name for me at the hospital, my mom and dad had already decided that my nickname would be Dee Dee, so for all practical purposes, that was my name from the day I was born and still is to this day, except, again, when it isn't. And for years, on the first day of school, I'd have to respond to that first roll call. Ahmad Chadran, here, but everyone calls me Dee Dee. And this continued into college and grad school and well into my career. So let me back up a little bit. By way of explanation, unlike most Anglo nicknames, Indonesians tend to form nicknames not from the first syllable or two of a given name, think Meg for Megan or Bobby for Robert, but from the last syllable or two. It's more like calling William Liam or Elizabeth Beth or Betsy. And you get it, people get it, it's not particle physics, but it's not exactly small talk either, is it? Oh, plus, my first full-time job was doing research for a consulting firm, so I'd find myself taking my clients down this little cross-cultural tutorial. Then they'd get past the initial awkwardness of calling me Dee Dee, and then the project would end after a couple of months. I'd never see or talk to them again. Finally, in the mid-1990s, I decided it wasn't worth all this effort. It occurred to me to simply manage two distinct identities, Dee Dee among my close friends and family, and Ahmad in my work circles. Easy enough. This was, mind you, a time before the emergence of these social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. There's a certain power we associate with names, isn't there? You parents out there, I know you know what I'm talking about. A lot of you maybe took more than 2 weeks to decide on a child's name. I believe my wife and I may have taken over a month to decide on our firstborn's name, one for the boy, one for a girl. It's a pretty big deal, isn't it? Now, I don't think it's a stretch to say that we feel a certain destiny associated with names. And I mean destiny because, like it or not, our names set expectations for those around us. I mean our friends, our teachers, counselors, employers, and business partners. Expectations about who we are and what we bring to the table or don't bring to the table. And it turns out our names do more than just set others' expectations. They actually set our own expectations too, which is something I didn't expect to find in my research. Well, a team of 3 psychologists found that people are disproportionately likely to choose occupations that sound like their names. According to this study, people named Dennis and Denise are more likely than chance would predict to wind up working as dentists, while those named Lauren and Lawrence are more likely to become lawyers. Kind of crazy, right? That's either just wacky enough to be believable or so simplistically intuitive that smells a little bit like a hoax, like an urban myth. Wait, you're laughing at the photo hack I did there, right, with the lab coat and the name badge? Yes, that is a dentist name I made out completely out of the blue, just to make my point. Here's the interesting thing. It turns out I didn't really need to do that. Check this out. And this, Robin Mahfood, food for the poor. That's just amazing. And this guy, Usain Bolt. Maybe you were like me watching this guy burn up the racetrack at the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing. Fastest sprinter in the world. All I could think of was, no way, is that his real name? It is Usain St. Leo Bolt. The theory that our names materially influence our career choices is called nominative determinism. I encourage you to Google it. There's some interesting stuff. Really, really interesting. There's even more to it that I'll go into here. The same team of psychologists conducted another study that found that we tend to live in places whose names resemble our own. An individual named Lewis is thus more likely than others to live in St. Louis, Missouri, and likewise, there's a higher than chance number of Charlottes who live in Charlotte, North Carolina, a statistical bump of Helenas who live in Helena, Montana, and a spike of Carls in Carlsbad, Texas, not to mention Carlsbad, New Mexico, and Carlsbad, California. I guess we're a little Carl heavy in the southeastern U.S. And by extension, we should expect global locales like Paris, Sydney, Troy, India, Persia, and Kent to also have a disproportionate number of Parises, Sydneys, Troys, Indias, Persias, and Kents, all namesakes, people living there. Okay, wait a second. Do you buy this? Do you believe that our names really can have that much control over the decisions we make? Haha. It turns out they can, as a matter of fact. Many of you may remember the Share a Coke campaign from the summers of 2013 and 2014. Coca-Cola substituted popular first names for its own iconic brand and logo. The goal was to increase Coke purchases among teenagers. Coke at the time was taking a beating because these teens were way into sports drinks like Gatorade, like vitamin water. Now, this is a global campaign, but in the U.S., this campaign helped Coke reach an additional 1.25 million teens over the teens they reached the previous year, and boost sales by 11%. Big numbers. By tapping into the fascination we have with our names, as well as tapping into the vast reach of social media, Coca-Cola managed to connect on a personal, emotional level with American teenagers. And in connecting this way, Coke sold a whole lot of product to a generation that had previously written off the soft drink as irrelevant and old-fashioned. This concept, that we naturally gravitate towards people, places, and things that resemble ourselves, is called implicit egotism. That's another great Google search for you. And search images, too. That's really, really entertaining. Well, so what has my research turned up to up until this point? Not only do our names strongly influence how others see us, our names influence our own choices, including what we do for a living, where we live, and what we buy. But what happens when we change our names? How much of a difference can that make? Is it even worth it? Well, fortunately, while researching these questions, I found somebody else who, like me, was willing to do a bit of name gaming.
And now it's time for Benedict Cumberbatch tries new names.
Hi, my name is Chad. Hi there. My name's Gary Miller. I work in agricultural insurance and I'd like to buy you a drink. How do you do? I'm Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I'm George Costanza. Hello. I'm certified public accountant David Weinstein. Sanjay Gupta. I'm 2 Chainz. My name is John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. Oh, that's your name too? What are the chances? I'm Al Roker. They call me the Gooch. I'm the Hamburglar.
Benedict Cumberbatch. A fine actor with an excellent name, if you ask me. That clip, courtesy of the Jimmy Kimmel Show and YouTube. Now, okay, unlike Benedict, I had made the decision to split my identity into 2, one for business, the other for friends and family. Now, at the time, this was a pretty big decision for me. And though I never realized it before, it dawned on me during this research where I got the idea that it might be okay to experiment with my name. My dad. That's him, with a group of friends outside the Indonesian embassy in Washington, D.C. Probably a cigarette break in the middle of a visiting dignitary's reception or a religious occasion. Check out their shoes. Totally styling, huh? I'm guessing this picture might have been taken in 1958 or 1959, assuming that cute little girl is maybe 2 years old. I'm still in touch with her. She's a few years older than I, so that's about it, just before I was born. My dad came to the States in the early 1950s on a Dutch merchant marine ship. He was working as a deckhand, pretty much a gopher, at the beck and call of captain and crew, but one who got the chance to visit some exotic port cities like Shanghai, Sydney, and Rio de Janeiro. When the vessel docked in New York City, he decided to jump ship. My family stories say that he pretended to be older than he actually was in order to be allowed to work on board. His mom and dad, my paternal grandparents, had passed away years before. There was nothing tying him to Gresik, the city of his birth, on the eastern tip of Java, near Surabaya, for those of you familiar with that part of the world. Dad kind of went underground in New York. For a while he shared a brownstone apartment in Brooklyn with a group of buddies, fellow Indonesians. These were the friends he brainstormed with to come up with his alias. He came to this country illegally, so to get a job, to put money in his pocket, food on the table, he assumed a new identity, Kalua Jackson. Unlike Aksan Chadran, Kalua Jackson was not an immigrant from Indonesia, but an American citizen who made his way to New York City from his native Honolulu, Hawaii. As Kalua Jackson, Dad took on a string of menial jobs. He worked as a pin setter. What's a pin setter? That's the guy whose job it was to put bowling pins back up into formation at the end of each frame, obviously in a time before automatic pin setting machines and ball returns. My dad cleaned and bussed tables in restaurants and later worked as a short order cook. At one point, Kalua also worked as a tailor, a seamster if you will, sewing cuffs on pants and doing other alterations. Dad had a lot of menial labor stories he shared with my brother and me, and he learned some mad skills from these experiences too. Like if you wanted your steak medium rare, he'd pan fry it to perfection. If my brother or I popped a shirt button, he was the one we'd ask to sew it back on. Now, decades later, I find it funny to imagine my dad telling all these white bosses that he grew up in Hawaii and that his parents, the Jacksons, decided to name him Kalua. I don't know whether anybody was fooled or not, but the cover was a convenient one, you have to admit, for him and for his bosses alike. Dad eventually found work at the Indonesian Consulate General in New York City, and then several years later transferred to the Indonesian Embassy on Massachusetts Avenue in Washington, D.C. Here's a snapshot of my dad and mom tripping the Light Fantastic in about 1970. I do believe I may have taken this picture with my Kodak Instamatic camera. I'm guessing this was the embassy holiday party, given the attire, the streamers, and the balloons. Anyway, now that my dad was working for the Indonesian government, he was completely legal. He reverted to the name Aksan, and his alter ego, Kalua Jackson of Hawaii, quietly disappeared. Great story. I love this story. And thanks for letting me share it with you. Unfortunately, it still doesn't really answer my question, what is the impact of changing our names on our well-being and on our destiny? Continuing my research, I found a really interesting study done in Beijing by a team of Chinese and American psychologists. This was a big study involving 304 pairs of adolescent twins, including a mix of identical twins and fraternal twins, as well as of same-sex twins and boy-girl twins. This team wanted to measure the relationship between being happy with one's name and overall life satisfaction and well-being. The psychologists studied twins to rule out the influence of genetics and environmental factors. What they found is that those that liked their names tended to be happier and healthier than those who did not. Then I found another study, this one done by psychologists at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, actually Urbana-Champaign, that looked more generally at our ability to change our personalities. To be clear, this study didn't involve changing anyone's name, but instead changing specific personality attributes through focus and intention. The The psychologists found that subjects who set goals to improve one or more of a set of personality attributes, they included openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, they were able to effect positive change. So it turns out if you focus, if you set concrete goals, you can not only change your personality for the better, you can do it, according to this study, in as quickly as 4 months. That's pretty positive. That's very powerful. Taking these studies together, 2 things became clear. First, we each have the power to change our destinies for the better. And second, when we change our names, we can take an active role in the transformation. Now, in my own case, am I happier or do I have a healthier sense of well-being as the result of splitting my identities in 2? Okay, granted, I have absolutely no medical or psychological credentials, but I definitely consider myself to be happy and psychologically healthy. So how much of this is due to my name split? That I can't really say, though the research out there makes me feel I made a positive difference in my sense of self, my ability to master my own destiny. My name split does help me navigate my social media. I Facebook as Didi, I LinkedIn as Ahmad. I have 2 separate Twitter accounts, one for Didi and one for Ahmad. So that's my story. I mean, granted, it's kind of an unusual situation. You probably won't need to split your identity the way I did, but there may be lots of reasons why you might want to change your name someday. To close out, if I've learned anything at all from this experience, it's the following. First, love your name. I hope you already love your name. If so, hallelujah, embrace it. Travel to places that sound like your name and see how they feel, what you learn about these places and about yourself. If you don't love your name, consider changing it. It's perfectly acceptable and maybe a really healthy change for you to make. Maybe not today, but a year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. We're constantly changing. Second, take a stand. Is there something inside you, maybe an energy or a life force? Or is there a moral, ethical, or spiritual principle that a good name change might help you put out into the world? Adopt a hashtag. Become a .com or a .org or a .me. 3. Do it for love. Make the big commitment. Find a name that lets you and your family or your band or your tribe become as one, like the Ramones did, like the 5 George Foremans, or like all the Who's in Whoville. Think about adopting a new first name, or inventing a new nickname, or squeezing in a new middle name while nobody's looking. Or think about dropping down to a single name like Dion of the Belmonts, or Rihanna, or Cher. Be your own meme. Your name is yours. Use it for you. Use it for good. Use it thoughtfully and responsibly. Thank you.